Okay, hi everyone. Gosh, I don't know what to say now that I got that kind of intro. It's making me shy. Don't believe the hype. That's usually what I say, and especially with my life, I always look at it as something that I just had to do. I just been going through the motions, and it's what brought me here today. It's interesting because the one question that people always ask me that I have a very hard time answering is, when did you know you were an entrepreneur? Did you ever know that you were an entrepreneur? And I never know how to answer that question because I don't think that I chose to be an entrepreneur. I just think it's a reflection of who I am. And but there's one time in my life that it brings me back to, and that was I was probably 13. I probably don't want to tell my age, but you all will know it. And I was 13, and I was just about 13, living in Niger. It's a country in Africa next to the Sahara Desert where it's extremely hot, and cold water and a fan made out of a newspaper or a piece of cardboard was basically the hottest item in town. And all I remember is waking up one day and asking my mom if she could buy little plastic bags for me, and if she could also try to find somebody that I could work with that would be willing to go sell something. And that same night, I filled up those little plastic bags that she got with water and put them in the freezer. Next morning, went to school, came back at noon. Next morning, went to school, came back at noon, and all the water had frozen. Now I had ice bags, and there was this young man that my mom had engaged who came in. I gave him a cooler with all the ice bags, and he went out on the streets to sell them. And we were in business. That was my very first business. And all I remember is him coming back the first day within less than an hour with an empty cooler. I was so happy. It was like that level of satisfaction and that feeling that I got of just being able to identify a market and being able to serve a market was amazing. And so the next day we doubled the number of ice and we kept on going. It started getting quite successful, and needless to say, school got in the way of the business. My mom would say that the business got in the way of school, so I was back to doing homework. Not so cool, but necessary. And so that's, I think, the very first time that I started expressing myself as an entrepreneur. It was not technology, but now fast forward just about 27 years later. You can do the math later, don't do it now. And I am proud to say I feel comfortable now saying, yes, I'm a female entrepreneur in technology. And the reason I'm able to say that is because I realize that I'm able to express myself in every kind of way as a woman, as an entrepreneur, and as a technologist. And it's an interesting process for me to go through in terms of just understanding how I got there as it relates to even the technology side of it all. I didn't know that I wanted to be in technology. I was good at math. I came to the United States in '93 from Senegal, which is where I'm from originally. And when I got here, I didn't speak much English. I had to go through the intensive English program. I started as an undecided major, then decided I was going to be a business major because my sister was in a business major and everybody was pressuring me to pick a major. Then I decided that's not what I really want to do. I want to be a communications major, so then I started a Bachelor of Science in Broadcasting. And then the school said, well, now you have to pick a second major. And I was just like, goodness, all these decisions I have to make, and I really don't know who I am. And then, so broadcasting, I knew I loved. That I really loved. Just having finally the opportunity to be able to express myself and express my creativity. The other side of it was I loved math. So I went to my advisor, and he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. I said, well, what can I be with a major in math? And he said, well, you'll likely have to refine that, or you'll likely be a professor. And I was like, I'm not sure that's what I want to be, or that's where I see myself. And so he said, well, have you ever considered computer science? And I said, what's that? And he's like, okay, well, we're going to start with just having you go and meet with this professor. He actually also speaks French, so maybe you'll have a better way to communicate with him. And when I met with him, he's like, well, why don't you come to one of my classes? And I never left. And so that's when I decided to have my second major as computer science. And the funny thing is that wherever I go, as I was looking for jobs, when they would say, well, do you want to focus on broadcasting or do you want to focus on computer science? I was like, no, I want to do both. Why do I have to pick again? And that was, I think, the first time that I decided that I was not going to pick one or the other. I was just going to go with whatever made sense for me. And that's when I became more of a programmer. And I learned a lot by myself at home and worked for a number of startups. I did my first internship at the Miami Herald here in Miami, and worked for Nortel Networks, then joined a startup, and that was my introduction to the startup world. Now, one of the interesting facts there as a woman, one of the experiences I had with that very first startup job was I just remember my boss, they had just signed a big deal in France, and we were 4 engineers there. I was working primarily on the website. Everybody else was male, I was the female, and he came to the first programmer that was sitting next to me and he said, we have this new project, we need someone to go and help the client with the product because we sold that as part of the contract. Luis, would you like to go? And Luis says, no, I have my wife and my kids and I just don't want to go to Europe. He was just not the type that wanted to travel. And so my boss passed around me, went to the next guy and said, Rick, would you like to go to France to take care of this? And he's just like, no, I have my dog. It'll be very complicated for me to have somebody to take care of my dog. True story, and I'm still in contact with some of these guys. And then he went to the next one and said, George, what about you? He's like, oh, I'm still working through my visa. Traveling is going to be complicated. My boss walked again past me and said, I'm going to have to hire someone. And I turned around and said, well, what about me? And he's like, would you go? And I'm like, of course I would. And I'm thinking, Paris? Yes, I'll go. And so, and he's like, but you don't know the product. And I said, I'll learn. And I was just like, whatever you need me to do, these next 3 days, I won't sleep, just teach me. And that's when I went and started meeting with the clients. And what was supposed to be 2 weeks ended up being 3 months because I had sold more projects. I realized how much I loved working with clients, how much I just loved having that conversation and innovating and coming up with new ideas with the clients. And so that was just how I got onto the business side, moving from a programmer to becoming more of a business person. And then the company moved to San Francisco, and that's when I became an entrepreneur, starting my first company. It's a longer story, but I won't bore you with all that. And so now I am the founder and CEO of 2 different startups. I enjoy what I'm doing. Before that, I built my very first company, which was the first company to launch music recognition in the United States, if you know Shazam. I was the first one to bring that kind of solution with AT&T Wireless. I had actually an exclusive deal to use the Shazam fingerprinting at the time and sold the company to Gracenote. I had 2 offers from Shazam and Gracenote at the time. And so after that, I started my second company, which was focused on digital receipts. This is at the time before you ever heard about email receipts in the United States. I was just convinced that we needed to move away from paper receipts and go into digital receipts. And so that's when I started the company and build it up. But it was a very different experience from the first one. I was able to raise money from different angel groups around the United States and then just moved it on. Just sold it to a company through a joint venture that's based in Chicago. And that has now led me to moving on to my next ideas. What I love is innovation, new ideas. And I say as an entrepreneur, I don't think it's about having an idea because every single one of us always has an idea of what we want to do. What I love, and I think that what makes me an entrepreneur, is the fact that I love that process of going from the idea to an actual product and actually meeting that one person that you never met before that says, I used your product and I loved it. To me, once I get that with any single idea, I'm like, I've arrived, I'm done. I don't need, it's not about the money, it's not about the success, it's not about any of that, it's about just being able to make it real. And that process of doing the research, building the prototype, and then actually pitching it and convincing people that your vision is actually real, that's the satisfaction I get. And again, I could talk so much about all the experiences I've been through, but I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you again for having me. And if you have any questions, we can talk. Thanks.